Greg?
So Jordan, the obvious one is bye week. How'd you guys utilize it? Neil talked about self-scouting, look at things you do well, things you don't, try to maybe do a little schematical, personnel difference. So how'd you use the bye week in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's anytime it comes around that 4 or 5 game mark, that's a good point to self-evaluate a lot of things. And a lot of things, I said this at the beginning, you find out, especially, with rosters the way they are now, you find out in first what you can do and what you thought you could do, maybe that you couldn't. And so it gives you an opportunity to look at that, gives you an opportunity to look at how some things that continue to show up, or how you're being approached and attacked, and you try to address those things. And then there's always a fundamental side of things. You're trying to continuously improve. You're trying to bring guys, particularly ones that got here early, that have spring ball on their belt, that you're trying to evaluate if they're ready to help you. And so you get those guys a lot of reps. I thought it was a good week for us.
You found a couple guys that you sort of ID that could help you a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think, I think two that and one's already helping us on special teams, but I think there's two that can step in different roles and help us, and it's Jacob Boyce and Zay Jennings. I think up front, a couple guys that had good weeks. I mean, Elijah Kinsler is a guy that at some point will have to help us in a role. And Mekhi Byerson may be one of those guys. Nate Gabriel has taken a big step and has helped us. Had a freshman mistake in the game 2 weeks ago. And that's going to happen. But those are guys that can really help us.
With Sonny, obviously he's got a unique path to football and to college. When you guys were recruiting him, what did you see? Was it all potential? What were you viewing when you saw him?
It started with a phone call from his high school coach, who I'd had that area going back to even before we got here. So I knew the guy, and the guy called me during COVID, which couldn't see anybody. And he said, "I'm telling you, I got this kid who's I think it has a lot of potential," so on and so forth. And he goes, he was a sophomore, and he was 5'9", 185, 90 pounds. He goes, it just comes out for football. And he goes, you see this kid, he definitely doesn't look like that. And fast forward, me and Shadon both are in Atlanta. Collins Hill, North Gwinnett, which is Georgia 7A, really, really good level of football. And I asked him about the kid before the game, and he says, well, he's leading the state of Georgia in sacks. Had 19, I think, at the time. And I watched him, and nobody really knew about him at that point. So he had a sack and a half that night, one right in front of us. And everybody's there watching. I think he's at Ohio State. KT McDonald kid, nose guard at North Gwinnett. I think that's where he's at. But everybody's there watching him, and we see that kid. And luckily he signed early. I don't know if it goes into February, the word gets out. So, that's something that you got to kind of you hope works out in your favor, and it did for us.
When you were watching a player like that is still kind of raw, has a lot more development, that he can go through and improve on. You can't take too many guys like that, I guess. So is there a differentiator when you're saying, wow, this guy has these couple of attributes and that's the one I'm going to pull the trigger on?
I think it's a couple of factors there. I think is number one, how high do you think the ceiling is? And then number two, is it a schematic fit for you? And then three is probably depth. Like, do we have the time? If he's a developmental guy, do we have that time at that position? And with him, we did. That was right at the end of Dante's career. So, we thought we did. But can he do what? Even though he has a high ceiling as an athlete, or maybe just a pass rusher, where's his body going to go? And so does that fit what you're trying to do schematically? And so Asante checked all those boxes, and I think his best football is definitely ahead of him.
How much does it surprise you sometimes at how much he's kind of acclimated with such a short window he's been a football player?
It doesn't surprise me at all. He's, anytime you're, Asante was a soccer player. He's extremely athletic, can run, and then you put the body and the size with it, and really it's unlucky for him. It's almost like it's untapped because he still hasn't had a full off-season weight room to where the strength really shows up. The athleticism has always showed up big time in the bowl game. Now we're playing catch up with the strength of his lower body and his upper body. So again, I think his best football is ahead of it.
You have three guys in sort of that realm that didn't grow up traditional American football with Eddie V and Fatorma and him. Are there almost some positives that they didn't learn bad habits, or is it all negative because they have to catch up from not playing when they were 6 years old or whatever?
Well, I mean, I think sometimes it's a little bit of a catch-22. There's a lot of things that they don't know that American kids do know as far as how long they've played the game. So there's awareness factor there. But on the flip side of that, they also don't have any bad habits. They don't have any, random 7-on-7 coaches or whatever it is. They're a blank canvas, and we've seen that with Eddie V. It's kind of one of the things, and he just continued to learn and learn and learn. And I think the thing that Eddie has done better is understanding his weaknesses and playing against those or doing things to improve those, while still improving his strengths. He's really focused in the last 2 years on his weaknesses. And so that's the same thing with Fatorma. While he's been here, it's focusing on what were my weaknesses. We got you in a different position than what you were doing, so it benefits you. It helps those weaknesses more. And Hassan, he's in the early stages of figuring that out.
Coach, where would you say, now that you've had some time to watch film, the games are over, you had a week break, where would you say the state of the defense is now? The strengths, the weaknesses, the pass rush numbers obviously are way up. You're getting recognition for that, but pass defense was a major concern going into the Kansas game.
Yeah, I mean, you go in and some things. It's just a game of football. Maybe they're not going the way you thought they would, or maybe some guys aren't playing the way that they obviously can, and you just have to adjust. You see those as the game goes on. You don't want them to play out in games, especially big ones, but all right, it is what it is. And then you have to adjust, and we did. We adjusted a couple things in the Kansas game. We knew what the things that had showed up on film that were really, really hurting us. So we did a couple things to play against that. Well, when you do that, you're creating some other things, which, it's kind of like, well, hey, we're willing to, what are you willing to do to help this? That you're going to hurt from this. And so we just had to figure that out as we go. And then obviously that's a hard opponent to do that. And if you watch, those guys do a phenomenal job, and they stress you they start in one thing, shift, trade motion to another thing, and they do it to everybody. And they create some issues. And those are things that you're just going back and forth the whole game to try to adjust to it. And I knew what we were giving up to be able to help with what was our weakness before. So now we got to try to marry them together and continue to improve. And that's just really where we are. And that's the way I look at it. Like, you got, all right, so things didn't go the way you thought they were starting out. How can we get better and just focus on that? And can't look backwards, you just got to look forward.
You got Spells, for example, he got a lot more in the Kansas game. We're going to see more of a similar lineup, similar players. They're going to keep on getting more.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you go in and you start divvying up reps, and guys have to understand, either got to play better, do their job, whatever it is. And then as the season goes, you start to kind of lean toward the hot hand. And we'll see going forward who that is.
Is it Gordon, RPO game, quick passes, explosives, or that in order what you got to worry about with him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's, and I don't, watched a lot, obviously, in the off week. And I know there's some questions around, why with, they're not, he hasn't had those statistics that, I put zero stock into that. I've seen that kid at his best. He's an elite player. And it was about this time last year where they figured out ways to get him going. So I don't really put a whole lot of stock into that. But there's, the RPOs off of that are obviously something you have to know. Getting down there to stop him, and obviously you've seen a ton of shot plays. I mean, they had 490 yards of offense against Kansas State. You know, it's not like they're not gaining. You know, they're not making plays. They are. So extremely explosive. You know, they've given up 1 sack and then the whole season for a reason. And the ball's coming out. So, but those are things, and that's a good order you put it in. That's pretty much what it is.
Always seems like, too, that they have a second receiver. Obviously, Presley's the guy, but Stripley was the big guy against Kansas State. How do you balance those two? How do you have to focus on 2 different guys there?
You got to figure it out. You know, you got to figure it out. And so, you know, you just, again, it's a lot like the Kansas game. It's like, hey, what, you know, how do you continue to improve your weaknesses, trying to get your strengths in the places that you need them, and then you just go from there, knowing that I mean, they've got good players. There's no that's on video. So you just have to, again, you just play it, trying to play the chess match on where and when and what and who and what you're willing to sacrifice to do that.
What do you think, looking back a little bit and all these big performance, especially in the fourth quarter last year, what do you think kind of broke down for you guys to allow him to go for 141 in a quarter? And then do you feel like you're better suited to not allow that to happen again?
I've watched that game a lot, and it's tough because with 9 minutes to go in the game, there's a way more good than bad up to that point. You know, I think one thing, we made a huge special teams mistake that we really kind of forced us a little bit. Probably got into a 4-minute defense type situation before we really needed to, and that caused us to really kind of have to gamble there. And in hindsight, maybe we did, maybe we didn't. But you know, if we make a tackle there on the screen on Presley, it goes from 3rd and 4 to 3rd and 8. They kick a field goal. They've already missed 1. It's 20-20, I think, at that point. And, you know, and then you go to the next drive. They score a touchdown on that play. And then the next drive, I think there's 7 and some change left. It's 27-27. We had 30 yards in penalties in 1 play. And then that forces, that next touchdown forces us to have to gamble way more than we wanted to up to that point, as far as the pressure we were sending or having to send to try to get the ball back. So that was, you know, and again, those are great until one person goes 1 yard this way, or you know, all those, everybody's up like pressure. Well, that's great, but there's nobody in the middle of the field to try to make that happen. You better get him down the line, or otherwise, there it goes. And so that was something that, again, that mistake kind of forced us to gamble a little bit, probably before we needed to.
You bring up at all with your players this year?
No. We're about 24.
How impactful is the loss of WVU then for your defense?
You know, I think it's, you know, obviously his mentality, how he plays, what he brings to the table, the respect the guys have for him. You know, that is something that and just his strain and his effort. You know, I think I look back over those couple of games, there's probably a few more pressures and sacks in there just because of how he plays. And it's something we needed, but, you know, hey, it is what it is. And the people have to step up and step up in those roles, and maybe some a little bit before they're ready, but that's part of the game. I hate it for him more than anything, you know.
Have you guys had conversations about future? You know, he could redshirt. Do you have that, or is that something that's further down the line?
That's a little further down the line, you know. You're like, depending on him and what he wants to do, but that's something we'll talk about when it's time to talk about it.
Okay, thank you, Coach.
Mm-hmm.